Hey everyone, this is Megan Hillier from Know Your Ancestors, and you're listening to the Know Your Ancestors podcast. Many of us have an innate desire to understand our roots, to know where we come from, and to understand the lives of our ancestors. On the show, I sit down with content creators and entrepreneurs to share some of the stories that I've uncovered and compiled about their own ancestors. Watch and listen as we discuss the traumatic and life-changing events of their close ancestors that helped shape who these guests are today. All right. Well, welcome to the podcast today. I am sitting here with Zach Mander, and I'm excited to talk to him. I'd love for him to introduce himself and just help us get to know who he is, a bit about his work, and then we will get started with talking about your ancestors.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to hearing about my family tree. I know nothing, basically, or very little. But yeah, I'm a father of two young children. I've been married for 10 years. And for work, I'm a radio announcer and content creator. I make a lot of videos online. I think that's how we came into contact with each other. And so
Yes.
I do have kind of an interest in history, and I would say I have an interest in personal history, but I don't really have anything to show for that. So I'm not sure if I can actually support that claim.
Well, that's a good claim. I mean, I did find you on Instagram, came across one of your funny videos and started following you. I just think, I don't know. Yeah, I like your humor, I guess. And so I see lately you've been taking photographs, especially with like old cameras and things. So there you go. You have some historic interest.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I do like old cameras. I like old things. I like going through what we call op shops. I think you might call them thrift stores, like charity stores that are
Hmm.
selling secondhand goods. I like things that have a story. And so I like to think that things had a life before I came across them. And I like to think about that life sometimes. So yeah, I think this is way up my alley. I
There
don't
we
know why I
go.
haven't looked into it in the past.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited. So I'm curious, Zach, how much did you know about your family growing up? Like you said, you don't know anything about your family tree really, but like, were you close with your grandparents, cousins, that sort of thing?
Yeah. There's no real reason why I wouldn't, because sometimes when someone says they don't know anything about their family history, it's because there was some type of division at some point where they couldn't get any information past a certain generation. But I was, pretty close to my grandparents. I spent a lot of time with one side over the holidays quite often. The other side lived very close, only a couple of suburbs away. We visited every week. But um, I'm not sure why. My granddad was a little older than my grandma, and he was in the Second World War, and I know that that was like you don't ask about it, and
Hmm.
I wonder if that was kind of like a maybe a point that we didn't really get any family history behind it. He also passed away when I was quite young, so I never was able
Hmm.
to have any personal conversations. And my other grandfather also passed away when I was fairly young as well. So yeah, maybe that's why as well. I would talk to my grandmothers a little bit, but I don't know. I don't know why I don't have, I have pretty clear up to my grandparents, but I don't know when we came to Australia. Like we obviously we have white skin. We haven't been here for that long. And
Right.
but I don't know what country. I think it's European. I think it's from the UK. But I don't know. I have no idea. And I've looked into Mander a little bit as a
Hmm.
surname. But that apparently it might mean basket weaver at some point, which kind of makes sense because you have occupational surnames, don't you?
Right.
Or a
Yeah.
lot of kind of European names.
Hmm.
But it also there's a meander with an E in it, and there was kind of that seemed like it was a prominent family at some stage. So I was like, well, have we dropped the E at some point? But
Right.
yeah, I think my parents probably just don't have a huge interest in it, and so it's never been. We don't really talk about it.
Right. Well, cool. Well, now I'm even more excited to share with you what I found. I'm just going to start sharing my screen and we're going to go into it.
Let's
So
go.
when I talked to you, you didn't have much information to give me, but we we got some things started here. So here
Fantastic.
is your family tree that I started building, you gave me like the names of your grandparents and then their parents. So we were able to start that out. Because I hadn't really done research Australian genealogy before, I consulted with another genealogist, Will Davis Coleman. He owns the Davis Family Detective Agency in the UK, and he kind of took a look at it first to kind of let me know, yes, you're on the right track or whatever. He said the Purtills, so Catherine Purtill, your great grandmother, that they came from County Clare, Ireland. That I think her father came from there. And then that Lance Mander here appeared to have come from Tottenham in London. He said the King line, we didn't have much information about her, and there was like 5 possible William and Beatrice Kings in Queensland, and so we're not totally sure which one those are. So maybe with some more family information, we can trace that line. And then, as you can see, your maternal line, there's a lot of public ancestry trees that have some information there that we got a little bit for these guys, and then it can probably go further back. So when I looked at your tree, I was like, okay, who do I want to focus on? Because you're like, I'll learn about whoever, I don't care. And so I thought it'd be neat to focus on your Mander line here.
Love it.
And see what we could find out. Probably would have been easier to focus on one of these ones that there's a lot more research that have been done on them that I could have just, copied, taken a look at. But I chose Lance Harold Mander to kind of focus on for this little presentation.
Well, immediately looking at this, even with this already, I'm like, wow, like to look at it's strange to look at surnames that some of these surnames have come up in my life before, like the Pertles. I kind of hear that name around like family reunions. So I'm like, I think that's second, third cousin or something like that. But it's interesting to see some of these names and to think that they're a part of your family history and you had never heard of them until I'm 35 right now. This is the first time I'm hearing from them. And I have never heard Ireland. And so I'm quite excited by that. So what's that? My great-great-grandfather, is it?
Yeah. Yeah. So he was from Ireland. Yeah.
So what does that make? Is that a 16th Irish? Can I claim that?
What? I think you can.
Yeah, why not?
All right. Okay, so I took a look at Lance. I found this marriage record of him. So here, I don't know if you can read that very well, but here's Lance Harold Charles Mander, who married Catherine Ann Purtill on the 31st of January, 1914 in Sydney. He was listed as being a clerk for his occupation. She was a dressmaker, and they got married at St. Mary's Cathedral. So then here you can see it lists his parents. So he was a bachelor, birthplace London, England. He was 31. And his parents, he listed them as Lance Harold Mander and Sarah Louise Rushton. So, and his father was a clerk. So that gives, a clue that he was born in London, right? So then we kind of started doing some more research and put all these things together. So your great grandparents, Lance Mander and Catherine Purtill, they were married, like I said, in 1914, and they had at least 4 children. Pretty sure it was just 4. Their son Arthur was born 4 months after they were married in May, I believe it was, in Sydney. And then Marjorie was born in 1915, Robert in 1919, and then your grandfather, Leonard, in 1923. And those last 3 were all born in Brisbane.
Wow.
So a couple of years later, there was World War I, right? And in your great-grandmother's obituary, Catherine, it stated that her husband, Lance, had served in the Navy during World War I, and that he specifically engaged in the historic Jutland Navy battle. Now, I wasn't really familiar with this battle, but apparently it's a famous Navy battle. I got some information off of Wikipedia that says the battle unfolded in extensive maneuvering and 3 main engagements from the 31st of May to the 1st of June, 1916, off the North Sea coast of Denmark's Jutland Peninsula. It was the largest naval battle and only full-scale clash of battleships of the war, and the outcome ensured that the Royal Navy denied the German surface fleet access to the North Sea, and the Atlantic for the remainder of the war, as Germany avoided all fleet-to-fleet contact thereafter. The Jutland was also the last major naval battle in any war fought primarily by battleships. So your great-grandfather was on one of those ships in this battle. I'm not sure if it was one of these pictured here, but these are two of the ships involved in that Jutland battle in World War I.
Whoa, that's I had no idea about that, and that's pretty eye-opening. That's never been raised in my family before. I've never heard about that. I've heard about my grandfather, and interestingly, so I believe Lance's son, who's my grandfather, was also in the Navy, the Australian Navy, and so immediately I'm seeing parallels of must have been following his dad's footsteps. He actually, from the story goes anyway, that he lied about his age, which a lot of people did.
Really?
And so he was too young to join, but he lied. And I'm thinking now, I'm wondering what that relationship was like with his dad, and whether that was something that he was encouraged to do, supported to do. Yeah, it just adds some story behind it, knowing that his father was also in the Navy and had fought in the First World War. I've got a lot of questions about that unfortunately no one's going to be able to answer. I'm just going to have to speculate.
Yeah. So, and I tried to find more about his service in the Navy, tried to find out what ship he was on and all of that, but I wasn't able to find anything. But thought that was interesting that was noted in his wife's obituary. So he must have been pretty proud of that, for that to be written there.
That was the English Navy, right? Because he was born in
I would
London.
assume so. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So, well, I'm not actually sure, because he would have come to Australia because he got married in Australia. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I wonder.
Did Australia have a navy in the World War I? I don't.
Well, we fought with
on our history.
With
the
fought
British.
with the English, so I'm not sure exactly what our involvement would curtail, but either is possible, I think.
Right. Yeah. So thought that was cool. So World War ended. The World War I ended in November of 1918, and you can see that Lance returned to Australia as they had a son in October of the following year in 1919. And then your grandfather was born in 1923 when Lance was 42. So this is where Lance and Catherine Mander were living in 1919, at Petrie Terrace in Brisbane, 36 Belgrave Street. You can see they're listed on this directory here. And Lance was listed as being a laborer, and Catherine, home duties was her occupation there. But cute little house there.
That's a beautiful house, and I'm actually getting I'm getting goosebumps seeing this, because it's so strange to me that I could go to that house probably, and it looks like, I mean, I'm not sure. I imagine you got this from Street View, but it looks like it was largely the same or similar.
I would think so. I mean, I don't know for sure that that's the same house in 1919, but looks like it could be.
It definitely could be, and thankfully, what they're doing now with these houses is that house would be worth a lot, because they're kind of these classic character homes, and so I imagine, crossed fingers, it will be like that for a long time still. And this weekend, I'm going to visit.
There you go. Well, I'd love to see your adventures as you go visit.
Yeah. That's real. I wonder. I'm not going to go through the people's home. Obviously, someone lives there. There's been plenty of generations still. But I wonder if you hear those stories about people pulling up carpet, and there was a newspaper or
you never know,
someone's photo. Yeah, I wonder if there's anything in the backyard, or there's any trace of them. 100 years later.
That'd be cool. Very cool. Yeah. So here it is for those that aren't familiar with Brisbane, about where that was located in that city.
I'm actually about a kilometer away from that right now as we sit
Oh, are you
as we
really?
talk.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so yeah, that's really weird to think that you know we're within 2 kilometers. Our family's been here for 100 years now.
Very cool. That is cool. All right. So when your grandfather was 10, his older sister, Marjorie, so he had an older sister and two older brothers. His older sister passed away when she was 17. I got her death record, and it said that she died of chronic nephritis, which is a kidney disease of some sort. Um, Lance's occupation here was listed as council employee, and they were living on Milne Street in Spring Hill. That's in Brisbane, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, in
Yep.
Brisbane. Yeah, so I'm not sure. I'm sure that would have been kind of a hard thing for him as a 10-year-old, his older sister passing away. Not sure how that would have affected him and his family, but thought that was a sad thing.
Yeah, I think he had, from what I remember, he had two siblings pass away.
Yes,
In
there's
their
another one.
kind of
Yeah, he
uh
was also 17.
I have a feeling that it might have been lead poisoning.
Oh,
Was
really?
that consistent with this kind of medical
I'm not
diagnosis?
sure. I think I looked up what that one was and now I can't remember. The second cause of death was like hyperpices. Not sure
Yeah, I'm
what
not
that is.
sure
Hmm.
how common that
You think it
was,
was
but
lead
you'd
poisoning?
think that it was pretty significant in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were living here at this house on 22 Milne Street in Brisbane. Um, they lived here for at least until 1941. And again, that's pretty close to where they were before. And then, like
And
you said, what were you going to say? Were you
wow.
going to say something?
I was just going to say another house that hasn't changed. So they've been
Yes,
fortunate
I
that
know. I know.
no one has flattened these houses and bought
Yeah. It looks like
some
right
kind of
next door they're doing something, but yeah, that house is still there.
yeah.
So
Wow.
then, like you said, her brother, Robert Harold, passed away in 1937. He was also 17 years old. I didn't order his death record, so I don't know what his cause of death was, but they shared a burial plot here at the Toowong Cemetery in Brisbane. So you can see Marjorie Kathleen Mander. She died on Good Friday in 1933 at 17 years old. And then Robert Harold Mander died the 31st of July, 1937, also aged 17. So,
Whew. I mean, you talk about um, what effect this had on him. My uncle's name is Robert,
mm,
so that would have been Leonard's son. So this Robert who passed away was his brother,
yeah.
and so yeah, obviously he was thinking about it. Well,
Hmm.
it's not. I mean, maybe he wasn't, but that would be a pretty big
I'm sure
coincidence,
he
I
would
would
have.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He would have been about 14 when he passed. So, yeah, I'm sure that was hard and had a relationship with him that wanted to carry on. Yeah.
And I've never heard that, and that's wild.
Oh, really?
We like I talk to my uncle pretty often. I'm gonna bring up this Christmas. Hey,
Why don't you
you
tell me
know
all
who
these
you're
things?
named after? Why has no one ever
Yeah.
told me this?
Yeah. So here's those two other sons. So Lance and Catherine had two sons left after those two had passed away. Arthur John, who is here with his bride, and then your grandfather, Leonard Gerald. Now, like you had said, Leonard was also in the Navy, and so was Arthur. So they both served in the Navy in World War II. Um,
Do you know what's wild about this? I mean, that looks like my grandfather, and it's my great uncle. That kind of makes sense.
yes.
Brothers are probably going to look similar. His
Yes.
wife looks incredibly like my sister.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Again, makes sense. That's how genetics work. But yeah, it's just weird to see that kind of through line. I'm going to show
Hmm.
my sister this picture.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So while they were gone to war, their mother, Catherine, passed away at the age of 52. So she had been staying at a hospital, it says, for at least a year, it seems like here, for some time. This, I'm not sure how to say it, Diamantina Hospital in Brisbane. It was a hospital for chronic diseases. Ordering her death record would allow us to see, cause of death or the length of her illness. But she was only 52. This was in 1943, I believe. I guess I didn't write that down here. But that probably would have been hard as her sons are off to war. Then their mother passes away. And that's where it says her husband took part in the historic Jutland naval battle in the last war. So there you go. So then 13 years later, your great-grandfather passed away at the age of 75 of heart failure. You can see his name, Lance Harold Mander, 75 years old. And he was cremated at the Mount Thompson Crematorium in Brisbane. It says he was born in London and had been in Queensland for 45 years. So likely about 1911, he came to Australia.
Wow.
I just stop sharing for a minute. So now you've learned a little bit more about your great-grandfather. We're going to go into a bit more of his earlier life. But how are you feeling now that you've learned a bit more about him and his family?
Well, I'm feeling more about my grandfather because, that's my connection. He passed away when I was about 6, and I only have a few memories of him, but I have been told he was a quiet guy and didn't share much. And I'm thinking about a lot of these things, and I can kind of maybe speculate why. I mean, fought in a world war. His father fought in a world war. He lost 2 siblings before adulthood, and then his mother passed away while he was away.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. And that's a lot of significant kind of loss and significant trauma. And so it's eye-opening. And yeah, I don't know. It gives me another dimension to someone I've heard things about, but I didn't know too well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, it gives you a bit of more understanding of who they were, right? Yeah. So then I wanted to learn more about his earlier life, in London, what his family was like there. So I spent a lot of time trying to find a birth record for this Lance Harold Mander. And in England, birth records started being recorded in 1837. So there should be a birth record for him, right? But I couldn't find one. I looked on a wide range of years and couldn't find anything. But I did find this one for a Harold Lance Rushton. So if you remember on his death record, it listed, let's just go back, his name is Lance Harold Rushton Mander. And then on his birth record, his marriage record, it lists his mother as Sarah Louisa Rushton. So I thought, okay, well, maybe she wasn't married when she had him. Maybe he was born and then married Mander later, right?
Okay.
So that's what I am like 95% sure what happened, but obviously we can't be certain about things because there might just not be a birth record for him for some reason. But it seems to line up, and I'll show you why as we go along. But so here's his birth record from the 4th of December, 1880. He was born on 16 Tracy Street, which is on Kennington Road in Lambeth, London, to Louisa Rushton. So you can see there's no one listed. Normally a father is listed here. No father is listed there. And then here's his christening record in 1882, Harold Lance to Louisa Rushton, a single woman. So
wow,
I'm pretty certain this is him, and we'll show some more clues that kind of tie it all together. So here's where that Kennington Road is in relation to London there. So kind of right in the middle of London. So in 1881, so this would have been just after he was born in December, I believe this is him here. So there's a Harold L. Rushton who's living as a boarder. He's 4 months old, and he's living with this John Wright and Eliza Wright in at Salway Hill in London. This was the only Harold or Lance Rushton. There was no Harold or Lance Mander of that age in that census either. So I'm pretty sure that this is him. And then the only Louisa, oh, I think I moved this so highlighted on the wrong person, but here, Louisa Rushton is here at the bottom and was a servant to this family, a cigarette maker on Macclesfield Street in London, which is about 10 miles from where her son would have been living in that same census. So he was likely living with this family, being taken care of by them as she was living as a servant in another household. Again, this can't be certain that this is actually her, but the only one that matched the only right age and everything. So I'm pretty sure it is her. But so you can see that they lived. This is where Louisa or Sarah Louisa would have lived, and this is where Lance would have lived during that census. So then by 1891, here's where the Mander family comes in. So here you see Sarah L. Mander, and Charles J. Mander was the head of the household. She's the wife. And then we have a Lance, who's 10 years old, Kathleen, and Marjorie. So do those names sound familiar? Marjorie and Kathleen?
Yeah.
Yes. So Sarah
What's happening here? Because the baby was being boarded and she was living, and then the baby, but they reconnected? Is that?
Yeah, so that 1881 was when the census was taken and he was 4 months old. So then there's this census 10 years, whoops, not this one. This one 10 years later, where he's 10 years old now.
So, I mean, I'm not familiar with what was common in that area at that time, but so she was working elsewhere. The baby was like in some type of care from another family.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not as if the baby was like put up for adoption permanently, or
I don't think so.
Maybe that was a common thing. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, I think as a single mother, like she probably just had her child being looked after by someone else as she had to work. Yeah, that's my guess. Wow. And then by 1891, she was married to Charles J. Mander, and then they had 2 children. So that's kind of my hypothesis. Lance is 10 year, and you can see his birthplace is listed as Kennington, Lambeth, which is the same as that birth record that we found for the Harold Lance Rushton. So I'm pretty confident that that was him, and that his mother was with Charles Mander by 1891. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so if you remember, Lance, so your great-grandfather also had a daughter named Marjorie Kathleen. Yeah. Which that's the names of his 2 sisters. So that's why I'm pretty sure that this is the right family.
Yeah, there seems to be, and then I said earlier that my grandfather named his son after his uncle.
Right.
So there seems to be a trend of keeping the names in the family.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is where that family, where they were living at 10 Phillip Lane. They were living there when their daughter Kathleen was born in 1885. And then they were living at 4 Phillip Lane. So this is Phillip Lane here. So they were living in one of these places here. And this is like a bus depot now. So it could have been where that is now. But they were living right across the street from this big Holy Trinity Parish Church that was right across the street. So this is where they would have been living in relation to London now. So on the north side there. So as I was researching Charles James Mander, I was trying to find a marriage record for him and Lance's mother, Sarah Louisa Rushton, because they were now in the 1891 census together, listed as husband and wife. They had 2 children together. And while I was looking for that marriage, I found another marriage for a Charles James Mander to Fanny Elizabeth Hewitt. And they had 2 sons, Charles William Mander and Arthur, I forget what his middle name was, something Coke Mander. Okay, so he had those 2 sons. And then in the 1881 census and 1891 census, these 2 sons were living with Charles's brother, William. So I'm not sure what happened there, where their mother went or anything. I tried looking for a death record for Fanny. I'm not sure what happened, but in any case, by 1891, Charles was with Sarah and they had, Lance and then these 2 daughters, Kathleen and Marjorie.
Wow. Yeah, I guess so these that was possibly a previous marriage. Something's happened to Fanny, and Charles and Sarah have got together, and Sarah already had Lance, possibly.
Yes. That's what I'm thinking. Yes. So, I couldn't find a marriage record for Charles and Sarah. The only one I could find was one from 1906, and I ordered it, but they have to mail the marriage ones. So it'll take a couple weeks to get here, but I will update you when that comes. But you can see this is a marriage for Sarah Louisa Rushton and a Charles James Mander in 1906. So I'm like, the chances that there's another Charles James Mander marrying a Sarah Louisa Rushton is pretty unlikely. So I'm not sure if maybe this Fanny had passed away by 1906, then now they could legally get married, or why they would have waited till 1906 to get married. But once I get that marriage record, I can make sure that it's actually them and find out maybe there's some more clues there. But kind of another hole that I'm like, okay, I wish I could find the answer for sure, but sometimes with genealogy, you just kind of take what you can get and try to figure out as best you can.
Yeah, I guess, it's pretty wild with in a lot of ways it's remarkable how much information you can get, seeing as it's like paper, handwritten. Like sometimes you can't even read the handwriting.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, it's going to be, I'm sure that in some part of you must think how much easier it'd be to be a genealogist in 200 years, where it's like, we'd just be able to search anything at any time.
Everything's online.
Come up
too
really
much
easily.
is online. Yes. Yeah. That would be nice.
I wonder if in 200 years time, if one of my ancestors is doing a similar podcast like this, and they're bringing up my Instagram videos, and I wonder how my ancestors will look upon it. They're like, there's this thing called Instagram. He seemed to have some type of obsession with making videos on it. None of this is going to make any sense to you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of videos about Bluey. Have you ever heard of that? Does that mean anything to your family? He seemed obsessed with it.
Seemed very significant. Yes. No, it's true. You got to be careful. But so here is the 1901 census that I found for them. So here we see Charles and Sarah again. And now he goes by Harold. Harold Mander is 20 now, and Kathleen and Marjorie are still there. So his father's a barrister's clerk, and he seemed to have that occupation in all of the records that I've came across about him. So they were living up here in 1891, and now they're living just down here. So not too far from where they were living before. So then here is an interesting record that I was trying to find more information about also. So we have a Lance Harold Mander, who's 23 years old in 1903, marrying Caroline Esther Scales, who was 22. So Lance, his father, I don't know if you can read that very well, but his father's name was Charles James Mander, who's a barrister's clerk. And it appears that this is your great grandfather, Lance Harold Mander.
Mm.
So we got kind of a similar thing to his adopted father, whatever, that he's married before and then got married again and had more children. But I tried to locate like a death record for this Caroline. I couldn't find anything. So I'm not sure what happened with that relationship. It doesn't appear like they had any children. At least I couldn't find any records for children, but I'm pretty sure this is him. He got married on September 15th, 1903 in Tottenham, which is just a part of London.
Mm.
So, another record I found. So then I was just kind of trying to piece together, where did he go? What was going on with him? Finding whatever records I could. And here's a ship record that he worked on a crew on a ship that I think they went to New York is where it had gone. But so in May 1907, he was aboard a ship called the Majestic as a plate washer. I don't know if you can read that, but his occupation was plate washer. And the pay for a month working on the ship was £3. And it says that he got paid £2.04. Is that what the next one over is? I'm
I
not
think
sure.
so.
But
We've been in the decimal system for my whole lifetime, so I'm not positive,
yes.
but sounds like
Yes. So
likely.
I think he was on the ship for just a little bit less than a month. And so he got just over £2.
And
And
he was in the Navy later, right? This is
yes.
in the
Yeah.
First
So
World
this
War.
is 1907. Yeah. So he was in the Navy. So it would have been like 1918 about. No, 1915 about. Yeah.
So he has
So
he's been on a ship before.
yes. Yes. And there
And
was
as a
actually
plate
a
washer.
plate. There was actually a couple other ship manifests. So I was like, that could be him, but I wasn't totally sure.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, I'm pretty confident it is him. London is his birthplace, and his residence was 47 Devonshire in Palmer's Green, which will come up again here. So here is his mother's death record. She died on the 2nd of September, 1914 at 47 Devonshire Road, Palmer's Green. So this was the same house that he had listed on that ship manifest ship record there. So she died of atheroma, which is like a buildup of plaque on the arteries, and cerebral degeneration. So something with her brain, the cerebrum. And she
So
was
59.
59 years old. Yeah. So in 1914, Lance would have been in Australia by now. He was married in January of that year, and they had their first son in May. So he would have been in Australia when his mother died in September of that year. And then this is that house. So this is 47 Devonshire Road in Palmer's Green in London. So there's all this huge row of houses that are like this, and this is theirs right here.
Wow. And so it's hard for me to imagine growing up in the world that I have, but no planes, well, not commercially anyway. And I imagine even getting information across the world from England would have taken a while. So,
yeah,
it could have taken a while for him to learn of his mother's passing. And
that's true.
Yeah, it's such a different place to now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so then this is where that house is in Palmer's Green, just a bit north. So to find more out about this Charles James Mander, who was, supposedly Lance's father and all of that, I ordered his will to see if there was anything said about him. It's probably small and hard to read, but he only lists 3 children in this will. So he lists his daughter Marjorie Alice here. She was married by then, so Marjorie Alice Beer, and then his other daughter Kathleen Jemmett. So she was married also by this time, and then his son Charles William Mander, which was one of the sons from his first marriage. His second son from that first marriage had died in 1915. So by 1921, when Charles James Mander passed away, he would have been gone by then. So thought that was interesting that Lance was not listed in his will at all. I'm not sure if that was because he was in Australia or if it's because he wasn't his biological son. I'm not totally sure, but I thought that was interesting. So, and
yeah, I just was briefly reading there as well. I don't know the context to these types of things, but I wish to be buried as quietly and inexpensively as possible without flowers.
yes, yeah,
Very pragmatic.
yeah. And I liked that he wrote, he said, in the grave at Southgate in which my wife is buried, since her death, she has never left my memory, no matter in whose society I might have been. She was my one thought, night and day. I'm like, huh.
Wow, poetic
Yeah,
for a will.
it is. It is. So
Well,
that was, so he died just 6 years after she had passed away. And then he did leave some money, it seems like, for his sister. It was a little unclear as I'm reading through that, but he seems to be a generous person and not showy. And he said at the end, he said, where is it? I wish I had more to give. At the very end of his will, he says there.
wow.
Yeah. So researching these ancestors has shown that there's, still some unanswered questions. We wish that we had more information about Fanny, what actually went on there, when he married Sarah, Louisa, Lance's mother, how that all went down, all of that. But we don't have all that information, obviously. But how are you feeling as you've learned a bit more about Lance? This is the end of what I have to share with you. That learning that, maybe that Mander surname is not a biological line, that Rushton was actually his birth name. How are you
Whoa.
feeling about all of that?
I didn't consider that till you just said it just then.
Oh, sorry.
Rushton. Okay, interesting. Well, it's fascinating because in some ways it changes a lot, and in most ways it changes nothing. It's like it can change the way you think about things, but in reality, and I think, that was probably my parents are quite pragmatic and they have a general interest, but I think without putting words in their mouth, they'd probably say, well, what is it? What, to go a few generations back, does it change present day? And maybe not, but it's good to have a sense of where you come from, I think. And at least personally, anyway, it might not be important to some people. And so I do find it fascinating. You can attach a lot to a surname. It's your sense of identity. And then it turns out that you might not have had it only a few generations ago. And so it is interesting to think about how fleeting identity can be, because you can be attaching so much to something that actually might not mean that much historically.
That's true.
Yeah, so maybe I should look into Russian. I might have a claim to something at some point down there. Maybe they have a castle somewhere. Although looking at a lot of the occupations, it seems like they're what we would call in Australia battlers, which were people, working class who are just, I look towards him being the washing dishes on a ship. And it seems to me that he was doing what he could to get by. And it makes me thankful to live in the day and age that we do and the opportunities that I've had. I mean, the 1800s in England, London in particular.
Yeah.
Sounds like a rough time. And so, maybe that's why, just speculating, Lance, I assume he would move for opportunity. And at that time,
so.
maybe, I have seen advertising in London around that time, come to Australia. And so, yeah, I imagine that's why he came.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when it comes down to it, like thinking about your surname, like even though he may have not been biologically a Mander, like I think you're still safe. Still
Yeah,
as still claim that line because there's definitely more to family trees than genetics. Like they're
certainly,
yeah,
certainly. And
yeah.
on some hands, his I guess stepdad, Charles,
Hmm.
seemed like that from as we saw in his will, seemed like he was a
Hmm.
thoughtful guy. But
Yeah.
then he also didn't include him in his will, so who
It's
knows
true.
why?
So I don't know.
Maybe
Yeah, it's too hard to
maybe
get
he
money to Australia. I don't know.
that could have been it. I mean, I don't
It
know
could have
what
been.
the details were. Maybe he
Yeah.
was doing okay. Maybe his
Maybe.
daughters weren't so much, and he's like,
Yeah.
this money will do more here.
Maybe. Yeah. But anyways, it's been fun to share with you, Zach, about your great grandfather Lance, and I hope
No,
that
thank
it's
you so
given you a
much.
bit.
I tell you what, I have things to go off now from physical places to visit, which I'm considering now, even when you're telling me that house in Petrie Terrace. I could walk there. I might do it this afternoon, see what type of state it's in.
See if you can fight it.
Um, it is 31 degrees at the moment, so maybe I'll wait for it to cool down a little bit. But
Mm-hmm.
and then also those photos of my great uncle and aunt
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen before. And
Oh,
I
cool.
would love to share those with my family too, because as I said, the family resemblance is really strong.
Oh, cool.
So, and then also the other thing that sticks out was that I always knew my grandfather fought in the Second World War. I never knew that my great grandfather fought in the
Mm-hmm.
First World War. And so,
Mm-hmm.
and then to also learn about his history, he had been a sailor before, or at least worked on ships.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's adding a lot to an area I had nothing. So it's given me kind of a few through lines. And we also learnt about the repeated naming children
Mm-hmm.
after either siblings or uncles or aunties or whatever.
Yeah.
And that could only be done with love, I think.
I think
I
so.
don't think you do that out of spite. So,
No, I would.
so it gives me that makes me feel quite a connection as well. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
no Zachary's, I'm not sure about.
Yeah. Where'd
I'm
that
not
come
seeing
from?
any connection there. But yeah, maybe we'd have to go a bit further back for that. But
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Zach. How can people find you? Find your Instagram or your radio show, or what are you doing?
yeah, just Instagram's probably the best way to go. Just search for Zach Mander. I'll be there making videos about cartoons from the 90s and taking photos on film cameras. So that's
Perfect.
what you can get.
All right. I'll put a link in the show notes to Zach. And thank you so much, Zach, for coming on and letting me do this for you. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed learning about that, and I really appreciate the effort you went to.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much for watching or listening to the podcast today. If you want to start learning about your own ancestors, you can get my free mini class called 3 Steps to Start Knowing Your Ancestors. It comes with a workbook. It's super short, but has actionable steps that you can take to start knowing your own ancestors. Just go to knowyourancestors.co/3steps or click the link in the show notes to sign up. Thanks again for being here, and we'll see you next time.